Let me begin by I guess I would say some of the things that we're going to go through will have some language, within it, and so I don't want to, leave anybody in the dark about some things, as I go through this. Just so that we all have the same understanding to what we're going to address today. And first of all, I've been asked to do this presentation in regards of Onigolha. Onigolha, the understanding that we have is what it means is Ngwani Kumula. Tuno Dweta Jitnakte Agwego and Banutunyungo. Agwego Jitnakte Ona and Wali Wagelo se Tuno be Andwete Ngwani Kumula. So the understanding is that how it became to be. It derives from the understanding of our minds, is what Onigolha is how we say it. But Onigolha is referring to the understanding to what we utilize in putting that together. So our first understanding that we say that we come to know or begin that understanding of how it came to be. And it goes back to the time of the peacemaker. That's another way, I guess, rather than just naming him, because there's also rules in that it refers to when you name the peacemaker. It's only during the time we say that when we do the great law recital. And so another term is used to refer to him as Wasugwano Shunite. He's the one that structured our house, to say, build our house, Wasugwano Shunite. And so it was at a time that we say that during that time, a lot of things were taking place, and it came to being that he was sent as a messenger, as they say. And in that was that he was to restore the understanding of what was going on with the people at that time. And we say that there was a lot of strife that was going on during that time, during our ancestors' time. And in that, a lot of hardships came about, and that was inflicted upon our peoples. And some of those that inflicted a lot of that was our young men, or they became to be known as warriors. And they would go from village to village, and they would raid the villages. And also in that time, they also took the lives of others as well. And also, it is our understanding too to say that they began to trade people, namely women and children, to other villages at that time, during that time. And so they were going from village to village doing all of these things. So, seeing that, we say that To ayu tuhake chikunchade. So it came to be to say that the Creator, that was never his intention that we would do such things to one another as human beings. And so it was then he decided to send a messenger to restore how we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to treat each other as human beings. And so this is then, they say that he had chosen a young woman. And this young woman was to, give birth to him here on this earth. And so fast forward from that time because this story is lengthy. I mean, we can go on forever, I don't know how many days we can go, but anyhow, so fast forwarding to the time now, the peacemaker, he began to set up with the ones who we refer to as the Ganyak Gehaga. So first of all, he came amongst the ones that they refer to as the people of the Flint, which are how we know it now today, or how they're referred to as the Mohawks, the Mohawk Nation. And so then, he began to establish what responsibilities that they should have between one another. As I said before, that was never the intention that human beings would do these kinds of things to one another. That all of the things that the Creator was seeing that people were doing to each other, so he sent the peacemaker to restore all of the things of how it should be. And in that, the understanding is that he then began to put all of these things together. And what I got again, how Hajjas say, Yat the Jung Way, Omanchage, the Yukwatamal. To know Andwe, the Skana, I want to New Jaysiki, that's. So then now, he says to them that how we should always care for one another. Now, caring and loving are sort of like they're connected. There's no separation in that understanding of how we care and love each other. There should always be that connection between, how we understand it and how we understand each other as human beings. And so when we have that, it was the understanding then that we come about to have peace between one another. Skenandore adwanuktonyo jaysike chugwe that's Georgekut and walihuana tuhagi yat the jungwe. So again, that understanding of peace also comes with the understanding of having that respectfulness and walihuana tuhagi yat the jungwe. To always have that respectfulness for one another. And so then, with that, he also said that where that derives from, ne tunu anwe de yungwa ni gungla, chinapte anwanu tunyungo tunu anwe. Ne ga ika kwe gung, chinapte lawelu suwayatisu, ne kwe tunu anwanu tunyungo. So then now, after he gave that explanation to how we should care and love one another and how we should have that peace and respectfulness to each other as human beings, where all of that understanding derives from is the power that we have. Now, the power that we have is our own minds. That's where our power comes from, and how we think. Because again, if you look at it, nobody is ever born with hate. Nobody. It's learned by us as human beings. We're the ones that teach that. And so it was then, the peacemaker said, that power comes from our minds and how we think. That's where it all derives from, is our power. We decide how we're going to treat one another and how we're going to be treated by each other. And so these are the things that he began to lay out and how we're going to be between one another as human beings. And so then, as he laid all of these things out, now there was one man, they say, that who was regarded as the leader. He was the leader of this particular village of where they came to, where he came to. And this man, they say that when he had heard the news that there was this man that was coming amongst them, that he was going to begin to lay out all of these things and how we're going to teach one another, how we're going to be towards one another. And so then, this man, they say, he was continuously awake, that he had very little sleep because he was so excited about the understanding that this man was coming, and that the understanding that he had was he was going to bring about change amongst one another. And so it was then. Once he arrived, so when he arrived, they say that now this is where this part comes in, that I think a lot of people kind of try to understand where things all fit. He began, first of all, he did not come into the community immediately. He made a fire outside of the community, outside of the village. Now that was the what they say was the protocol to whenever somebody is entering into someone's village or township or whatever, that they would first build this fire. And it would signify that someone is coming into town, into their village. Perhaps, maybe they have a message. So it was, when they seen the smoke that was arising, that was at the edge of the woods, as they refer to Galhakta. Oragwe Chigaya Lasanawana Wasagadanyekte Deniase Awuntka Zain Mukka Ne Naho. So then now the leader of the village, he summoned two of his men, his young men, to go investigate, to see who this is, this person that is coming to their village. So then they go, and once they get there, they see this man, and he's sitting there by a fire, and he's smoking a pipe. And so they come over to him, and they say that they were sent by the leader of their village to escort him back to the village and take him back to his place, to his lodge. And so he agrees, and he goes ahead, and so they go. And so once he gets there, the man that he meets up with is the one who is excited, and he's happy that there's going to be things that are going to change around, change from the village. And he said to him, "Are you the man that we are expecting?" And so the peacemaker, he says, "I believe so." And so the man, he began to say that he was awake continuously. He didn't sleep, hardly. He would be awake thinking that, he would arrive at any time, and he wanted to be awake. And so it was that he was awake. So then when the peacemaker heard this, and so he looked at him, and he said, "Since it is you that you are so elated in a way that you are happy to see me, this is what I'm going to call you. I'm going to change the name that everybody knows you as to a different name. Oneida Ngunadu kwe hayewate. Nay, he say, Ngunadu kwe jotkut sayeo. Jotkut satkat to hajese jignate yoti watan jade. Se sakse jignate agakwe niskana ahunuk tonyege sanjok." So then now he says, "I'm going to change your name to Hayewate." Now, how it changes, that means like he's always awake, he's always awakened. That's how we say it. But now it kind of changed as time goes on. Now they refer to him as Hiawatha. That's how that changed. So, but in the telling and the reciting of the great law, his name is Hayewate. So because he was so excited, and so he was always awakened, that's his name. Now, he then begins to say that he wants all of the people to know what this message is that he is bringing about to all his people. And so then he summons again a couple of the young men to tell all of the people in the village, all of the children, all of the young people, all of the adults and the elders, all to come together. So once they all come together, Hayewade, he begins to introduce him and saying that he has come amongst us to lay out all of the things of how we're to treat one another as human beings. And so then, just before he was beginning, now there was two of the men who was known as the war chief and his assistant. They came sort of like to the side. And so they stood there, and kind of like everybody kind of just moved over, as they were watching them, because they know these two men and how they are, because they had control over a lot of the young men in the village, in other villages as well, where whenever they decided that they were going to raid villages or whatever, then they would be the ones who would do this, excite all of the men to go raid somewhere. So anyway, so they were standing there, and the peacemaker then began to tell them of all of these things, of what the Creator has sent him to do, to reestablish the understanding of how we're supposed to treat each other as human beings. So then, as he laid it all out, these two men, the first one, the war chief, he comes forward and he says, "I've been listening to all of these things that you say, and I understand it, but I don't know if I want to accept it. The reason why I don't want to accept it is because you don't understand the way or the situation that we're in. We have people to the east of us. We have people to the north of us. We have people to the south of us, to the west of us. We have all of these other various nations or people, other peoples from other nations. What if they decide that they want to come in and they want to raid? They want to raid us. And if we set aside all of the things that we utilize to fight to fight against them, and we just lay on our bellies and not do nothing, what's going to happen to our people? So that's what he came to say to the peacemaker. And so then the peacemaker says, well, how do you feel? And how do you understand? And he asked his assistant what his thoughts were. And his assistant, he says, I agree with my war chief. All of the things that he says, this is what I too agree with. Whatever it is that he says, I'm in agreement to it. And so that was him, his assistant. And so then, the peacemaker then said, Ne hakwe go jinate lawelu sugwaya disi. Ne hakwe go to wahadagwe dunyose unwe unjagi. Ne hakwe go ne tone. Ne lawni wasa to wahadedane. Ne hostuha lawni gungla wahadedane. Ona owela wahadedane. Ona wawadun hede unwe. So then now the peacemaker says, he says, when the Creator, when he fashioned the human beings to be here on this earth, he formed it from the earth, and he took his own blood from himself, and he put it into this form of being that he made. He also took a piece of his mind, and he put it also inside. And then he gave life to it. He breathed life into this, and it became a human being. And so he says that when he did that, he was satisfied of how he was able to form the human being here on this earth. And he thought it to be that they would continue to live upon this earth. All of the things that he established here on the earth would be for their well-being. And in time, they will begin to be more. They would begin to create villages. They would begin to have families. All of these things were to continue. And so it was. But it was not the intention that we would harm one another. That was never the intention. He gave each and every one of us this life here on this earth, but it wasn't intended for us to take another's life. And so he said, so these are the things that you would explain to those who would be coming in to try to harm you. Give them that understanding. Give them that reason of what they are to be as human beings. How they treat each other. And so this is what he explained to the war chief and his assistant. And so the war chief, again, he says, okay, I can understand. So if that is so, you must possess power. You must possess some power within yourself. And so he says, if that is so, then show us your power. I want you to show us your power. If I'm going to believe all of these things that you say, I want you to show all of my people here, all of my people, to show me their power. And so then the peacemaker, he agreed. He says, okay. So He says, you decide what kind of fate that you want me to show. And so the war chief and his assistant, they began to kind of whisper to one another, talk to each other. And so the war chief, he says, okay, I have something. He says, not too far from here, there's a cliff that leads down in far below into the river. And there's a tree that is there, that is at the edge of this cliff. If you can climb to the top of that tree, and I will summon my men to take down that tree will begin to fall with you on top of it, down below, and along the jagged rocks along the side, and into the river. If you're able to survive from that fate, show us your power, then I will believe you. And so then, the peacemaker, he agreed. And so they all went. Everybody was cheering and hollering, because now they're going to see something great that is going to happen. Something that they've never seen. Even the kids were all just happy. So they all went, all of the people, they went to where this tree was. So the peacemaker, he climbed to this tree and climbed to the very tops. And once he got to the top, then he told the war chief that he is ready for them to do what they're looking to do, what they need to do. So the war chief summoned all of his men. They all came together. They began to start chopping at this tree. Now, we have to remember, they didn't have the metal axes at the time. They had stone flint axes and things like that. So it took them a little while, but they eventually got it to a point. Now the tree was beginning to topple, and sure enough, it toppled down with the peacemaker on top. They watched it. Everybody watched it. They were all standing on the edge. It began to hit the sides of the rocks as it was going down, and began to splinter, and it fell into the river down below. And I began to watch. All of the people were still cheering. And as they watched, the peacemaker, he didn't emerge from the water. And so after a while, they were still standing there watching. Now the war chief, he hollered out to all his people and said, I told you, see, you've seen for yourself that this man who came amongst us said all of these things, and that there's going to be peace amongst our people. Now, he was supposed to have power, but he didn't have it. So now he showed us that he doesn't possess any kinds of power. So whatever words that he was telling you, that they're only words that fall to the side. And so they all sort of all went back to their village. Now, what happened the next day, one of the young boys, probably about 10, 11 years old, he was outside and thinking about the peacemaker. He thought about him. I wonder whatever happened if he survived that. And just as he was thinking that, all of a sudden there was this column of smoke that came up. And so he went to go investigate. And when he got there, he seen that it was the peacemaker sitting by the fire again. And he was eating his meal in the morning. So he ran back to Hayewade, his lodge and told him, that man that we seen yesterday that was in that tree, he came back, he returned. So he was just so happy again. And so now, again, they summoned the two men to go escort him back, and so they did. They escorted him back. So when he got back, they already had all of the people gather again, even the war chief and his assistant. And so when the peacemaker came back, and so when he stood in front of them, in the two, he says, do you recall what you said? If I show you my power, you will begin to agree. You will agree to the things that I am bringing forward to all of your people. And so the war chief, he agreed, and he understood that the peacemaker did show him his power. He was able to escape from the fate that they had given him. And so it was. Now, the peacemaker, he said, Numa, Angusana Deni, Neji Nate, Ayechinado, Ohundum, Muskaha Wikte, the Gali Hogan, he said, Uganatum Wahage, Ohundum, Muskaha Wikte. And so then now, he says, you too, I am going to change your name as well. And the name that I am going to change is that you have two issues. You have two thoughts, two matters is your name, is what it's going to be, the Gali Hogun. And so as he stood there, he says, why did you choose that kind of name? Why did you choose that? And he says, because I know you said this, but you also think this. So you have two issues that you're always going to have. What you say and what you think are two different things. This is the name that I have changed, the name that you will be known as in the future. And so then he accepted that and understood that. So then now he looks upon his assistant, and so he asked him, he says, what is your responsibility? What do you do? And he says, well, I'm always here by the side of my war chief. But now, since he's not my war chief, I don't have anyone to assist anymore. And so he says, whatever my war chief, whatever it is that he says that we're going to do, I agree with him. I'm always in the same thought that he is. And so the peacemaker, he looked at him and says, okay, and you too, I will also change your name. And the name that you will be known as, Onawahal, Ne Ise, Angusana Deni, Ne Jinate, Ahonun He Wahake, Ohundus Kaha Wikte, Nega Igan Satekali Wade. You say, Satekali Wade Anga, Ohundus Kaha Wikte. And so he says, now the name that I change your name to is, you have the same matters. The same issues of things will always be the same, because that's the kind of person that you are. You're always in agreement with whatever it is that you're the Gali Hogun, the things that he was always doing. So in a future time, people will always know that, this name, Chatagalivati. And also, because you were that assistant to him, we will carry that on as time goes on, as I begin to establish all of the ones who will be known as Lutianesu. Ne Lutianesu angahage ne jinate jotgut ayoyandleke laudi nikungla ne sagate loyane ko ne sawayatisu ne lau hagwe gung lawe lo ka ika awatli wat the jetohage chubujati. So then now he says that in time, as I begin to establish all of these ones who will have these names as Lutianesu. And Lutianesu, the meaning of that is they're always in a good way, continuously. Yoyanle, Jotkot Yoyanle, Laudi Igula. It's always that their mind is always in a good way. Ludianesu. And he went further on to say that this is how the Creator is as well. Loyane Go is a great, he's always in a great way of thinking. Things are always in a good way with the Creator. And that is why he has been saddened by the way people treat each other on earth. Because, again, he came back to explain again, to say that he had taken part of his thoughts in his mind and put it into each human being on earth. That we would always have that. We would always have that part of the Creator of how we think, the things that we do. And that's why he was saddened by the fact that all of these things are carrying on this earth. These men are going around and causing destruction of all of the villages. So, that's how all of that came about. And so the peacemaker, he told them, he said, to begin to establish all of these things with all of your people. And I'm going to continue on. I'm going to continue on westward from here and look for more people. I'm going to look for the smoke, he says, of the people. And what that means is, when they say I'm looking for smoke, is that he's looking for villages, because at that time, where all of our villages, we had fires, and so that's what he was doing. Now, we come to being further in the story. There's a lot more, but again, fast forwarding. Now, what happened was now Hayewade and his partners, the Gully Hogan sought the Gulliwade. They were continuously doing these things and laying out all of the things of how people should treat one another. Now, they say that Hayewade had 3 daughters. And during that time, the 3 daughters, all of a sudden, they had taken ill. Well, the 2 older ones had taken ill. And both of them, they had passed away, they had died. And so this, now, Hayewade went into a depression state because of what had happened, and because no one knew what it was, what had happened. Now, there's a lot to this story. I mean, it's how we begin to establish ourselves. But Hayewade, he had thought that it was the work of Tadadaho. Now, Tadadaho is, again, from another nation, from the Onondaga people. Now, he had thought that because the peacemaker told him that he had told Tadadaho that he's going to begin to establish all of these things, and he's going to bring them forward to where he is, where he dwells. Now, it was known that Tadadaho was a sorcerer, or a wizard, or whatever you want to call him. And so, Tadadaho, he's told the peacemaker that he's going to be anxious. And he's going to want to see this for himself. Now, this is what he said, that this is, the peacemaker said that this is, he's going to be his power to bring all of these nations together in front of him. And so Tadadaho is going to become anxious, and he is going to see this. And if the peacemaker fails, then he's going to cause destruction throughout the land, because they say that he had that ability to do that. And so then Hayewade perhaps thought, it's not really known or understood as to who it was that caused the illnesses of his daughters for them to die. But now he had one daughter left, the younger one of all the three. Now, she was with child, they say. And so because of Hayewade and his depression, the other two that he was working with, they thought maybe it would be good if they were to organize a lacrosse game for him, to take his mind off of what's happened, to help ease his pain that he is going through in that loss. And so they did. And so they got all of the young men all together, and they began to start playing the lacrosse. Now again, the younger daughter, who's going to have a child, she has a mind that she wants to go to the river to get water. And so she does. She gets all of her containers of things, vessels, and walks down the path to the river. And she could hear all of this cheering going on and the game going on. It wasn't too far from the path that goes down to the river. So what happens, they say, she got her water, and on her return, as the men were playing their lacrosse game over here, all of a sudden they say that from the sky came down a bird, a great big bird, bigger than an eagle, they say, and it was all blue in color. No one's ever seen such a thing, this kind of a bird, before. And so it begins to fly down where all of these young men are playing lacrosse. As it's coming down, one of the men, they see it, and they tell the others, and so now they're all looking up. And that seems like as that bird is kind of like hovering over just above them, because now they're trying to capture it with their lacrosse sticks, but it's just high enough where they can't reach it. And it begins to fly off, and it's going this way. So now, because all of these men are chasing it, and they're trying to catch it, a young woman, Hayewade's daughter, is walking back on the path back to her lodge with the water. These men don't see her. She's right in the path of them, and they crash right into her. And they trampled over her, and which caused her untimely passing, as well as the child, the baby that she was carrying. So now, Hayewade goes into a much more deeper depressive state. So now, this is how he is. Ona wahal. Ya te wakanukte. Nakte ne auliwa. wa awan nokski anglu yolang ne to onge ya de waganote katsa nung onge sike. So now it comes into his mind because of how things has happened. Now all of his daughters are gone now, and so now it comes into his mind because he's in a dark state of mind, and so he says that he's going to now split the sky, and he's going to go in that direction. Wherever it is that he comes to be, or where he ends up to be, this is where he will dwell. And so that's what happened. He began to wander off from his village, not telling the others, the Gully Hoga and Santa Galibade, where he was going. He just left. He just walked on away. So, as he's going on, now what comes to being enters his mind again. For some unknown reason or whatever it was, he begins to think the state of mind that he is in. And as he's thinking of the things that are going on around him, he comes upon of where there's a lake. And at this lake he sees To Wadunihe Ohola da Suha Ona Ohanundago Tiga Oholoda Ne Watlakwe Ona Wahayake Gatni Wa Ohadidako Asliyan Ona Wahaslinundu Nega Igan. So then now, as he's walking about in his days of depression, now they say that he comes upon where there is this lake, and what he sees, there's all of these reeds that are growing by this lake. And you all know what horsetail is? What that kind of reed? Horsetail. Anyway, he sees that. They're kind of like straws, I guess. You know, that grow. Horsetail is what it is. Sometimes they call it scouring rush. But it grows by the waterways, by the lakes and rivers and that. So he had taken that. And once he began to section them into small pieces. And he had taken out some sinew, and he began to put this together on a string of sinew. And then when he had taken this, he had made 3 of these things. And so then, that evening, this is kind of like my diorama. So he made a fire, and he had taken these 3 strings of these reeds that he had made. Now this isn't real horsetail, I could have made that too. But anyway, just to give you what they look like. So he says, Dat Gantke To Ayawane Hunka Uskanhe Agyatlane Dat Ne Sagade Nihodinakto Jini Niyot Nega Iga Anke Las Nesan Igelhe Lono Hasan Ayunke Las Ne Ankatako O Nagamsa Oiska Imasoko Dahagi Nega Iga Anki Nungote Laudikahla Suha Ne Hakwegong Awata Qualishanse Jinaktesu Lonakato Hajase Junjade Nega Iga Unke Las. So now he says, when he sat down by the fire, he says, if ever a time that I come upon someone who is in the same state of mind as I am, whoever is in that way, that this is what I would do for them, and in hopes that they would do this for me as well. I would take a white buckskin, the softest of white buckskins, and I would wipe away the tears that has accumulated their eyes through this time, so that they can see clearly again all of the things that the Creator has bestowed here on this earth. This is what I would do for them. And in hopes that they too would do this for me, to wipe away the tears from my eyes, so I can see clearly again my path on this earth. And so then, it was then, now he said the second part of it, that also came to his thinking, in his mind. He says, too, that if ever he comes across someone who is in the same situation as he is, in this way, and that he says that I would take a soft white feather and I would brush away the dust of death from their ears. Because it's understandable of that when someone is in that situation, that they cannot hear what people are conveying to them. That they can't hear them because of how they are, the things that they are going through because of their loss. And so then I would do this for them. I would help them in this way, to take away, so that they can hear clearly again all of the words that people are expressing to them. This is what I would do. And in hopes that they would do this for me as well, to take away the obstruction from my ears, so that I can hear clearly again. So I can hear the people around me. So I can hear the birds again as they sing. And this is what I would do. And so he took another of the strings and then he laid it across. And then so now then, he says, again, if ever I meet someone who is in the same situation as I am, and that the things that they are going through, because what happens when we say that we lose someone that is close to us, a family member, we say that we are unable to speak to one another. It seems as though that our throats become tightened up. Sometimes we can't even take in the nourishment that people are providing for us. We cannot eat. We cannot even talk to one another because of how we are feeling. And so they say that also our heart becomes elevated. And it becomes lodged in our throats. We have that lump in our throats. We say that this is only as far as our feelings come to. We cannot express the hurt that we are feeling. And so then, he said that I would take the purest of waters from the earth and I would give it to them as a drink to take away that parchness from their throats, and also to help cleanse their hearts once again. And their hearts will become replaced to its proper place again. And that they are able to speak to one another again as a people. And that they're able to take in the nourishment again. And this is what I would do for them if ever I come across someone who is in the same situation as I, and in hopes that they would do the same for me. And so he's put that across. And then they say that this is what he had done. Each time he would come to a certain area or a place to rest for the night, he would make a small fire, and he would set this all up again in that same manner, and he would begin to say these words again. And so after a while, they say that these things became obsolete because they were made from that reed, and so they began to kind of fall apart. But he wanted to find a way that maybe there was something else that could maybe be preserved a little longer than that. So then now, as he's thinking about it, then he comes across Eliza, he comes across elderberry, the elderberry tree. And he knows and understands of how they are. And so he takes small pieces of the twigs. And when you cut into them, he began to section them off. And the middle of it is really like real soft. And so he poked it right through, poked the hole right through, and then he began to establish these. And he said the same words of the eyes and the ears and the throat. And he utilized these things to be now the things that he would use if ever he came across someone. Now, that became known, they say, as the first understanding of what, we didn't call it wampum though, but it was just strings, I guess I would say. Strings of matter is what it relates to. And so then now, because of his wandering, now they say that he came to a village, near a village. And again, that protocol of coming close to another village, so he made a fire. He made a small fire, and he started doing this again by his fire. Now they say that there was two young men. They were coming back from their hunting, and they noticed this fire that was at the edge of the woods. So they slowly went over to see, to investigate who this person is. Whether he was coming there to bring a message, or whether he was coming there to cause destruction. They don't know. So they were apprehensive when they came over. So when they came over, they saw him. And they observed him. And so they went back to the leader of the village. And when they came back, they began to report back to the leader. Nega ika wai twa gung lung wei. Nega ika lung wei doyu. Ya numando de het twat kat. Nega ika wahadi waninikan. Wahwa loli chikaya chohandu. So then now, when the two men reported back to the leader, they said, "We seen this man." Now that's an older word, and it's usually used in the reciting of this, meaning that older version of that word, meaning that they've never seen, it's someone that they've never seen before, this kind of person, ever. That's what it relates to, that's how it's explained. And so they said, he's sitting there by a fire. He seems to be doing something, but we're not too sure of what it is that he's doing. And so then the leader of the village, he says, "Well, you go back over there and you invite him. Tell him I'm inviting him to come back, and perhaps maybe he has a message. Maybe we can talk between the two of us, see what it is that what he is offering, what he's bringing." So the two men, they went back there, and one of the men, they stood in front of him. Nega iga wahakwadadih takse. Neji no juyu kwakai juyu wayakao. Nega iga lasanawana wahang. Yudohonjo wayataha wikte chiknu ton. And so then the first one, he says, "We come from the village, and the leader of our village, he has asked us to tell you that he would like for you to come back with us, back to his place of where he dwelt." So after he said that, he just sat there, staring at the fire, staring at the strings that were hanging over the rod by the fire. Didn't say a word. So the second guy, he says the same thing about their leader of the village. Would like him to come back. He would like to speak with him. After he went through his words of him escorting him back, and again, it was the same thing. He just sat there and didn't say a word. Looked at the fire, looked at the strings that were over the rod. He just sat there. So they just looked at each other, and then maybe he didn't understand us. I don't know. So then they left and they went back to the leader of the village. When they got back to him, the leader was looking around. He says, "Well, where's this person? How come you didn't bring him back?" And so they began to explain to him. They said, the both of us, we told him that we were there. We were there on a mission to bring him back, to escort him back to your place. But he didn't. It seemed as though he didn't hear us. He just sat there and stared at the fire. And so the leader of the village, he says, what was he doing? What is it why was he staring at the fire? And so they said, well, he had these things that were set up by the fire, and he had these strings that were laid over this stick, this rod that was there. And it seems as though he was saying some words, but we couldn't understand what it was he was saying. And that's all he would do, was just staring at it. And so the leader of the village, he began to think about this. And then he thought about it, and then he said, okay, I think I understand. Ona, wagit ni ko hulayan dani, nakte ni yut. Ona, wahade dakko, ostos, hatunya de ostos. Nega iga wahayage. Ona wahasliyen nunundung, ka iga. Ona wasagoyung, ka iga dehiyas. Nega iga usawite. Nega iga ona ahuano de tigalungwe. So then now, as now the leader, he thought about it and he kind of understood now. And he says, he had taken out an eagle feather and he began to cut it into pieces and he put it on a string. And as he put this on the string, and he gave it to these men, and he says, this is what will lead him back here to the village. Take this and present this to him and say, the leader of the village, he has asked for you to come to his place where he dwells. And so then, this is what they did. They said, they brought it back to Hayewade. The first one, he says, Nega ikan kanhatsli yadum hati. Neji kaya lasanawana chikdum yupana glatslaya. Ne wasogwadanye tanse. Nega ikan wasogwayu. Nega ikan deskayalundakpa. Nega nansasta. And wanansa. Onang wayak dahawite. Chikno tanaga. And so the one of the men, he says, we have been hired by the leader of our village, and he has summoned us to give this to you, that this is what is going to lead you back to his lodge. We are going to escort you and bring you to his place. And so then, at that moment then, Hayewade, he looked up and he saw what they were carrying. And he had taken that. And he agreed, I will now go with you. And so he got all of his stuff, these things, you know, put them all away. And he went to the village. So this has become known as the first invitation. The first invitation that began or came about of when we send messages to nations, other nations. This is what they would send, these words accompanying this. But not like this necessarily, because now we kind of fast forward again. And in our fast forward, we say that now we use the wampum. Now, again, it comes back to Hayewade. After they began to establish all of these men who would become the good-minded ones, as you refer to the Dionysu, and now they began to establish these nations that came before Tadadaho. And they were able to change the way Tadadaho was at that time, because he was such a person, or he was at the time when they first came upon him, he did not resemble a human being at all. He was almost like beast-like a person, and his hands were all gnarled up, and he had claws in both his feet as well, and throughout his body he was all deformed and crooked, sort of like in a way. And they say that in his hair there was all of these snakes, they say, that were writhing from his hair. And so after the peacemaker now established all of these nations coming together before him, they began to transform him back into humanness look again, to a human being. And so then, this is what they did. And after they did that, they began to establish of how they're going to be and how they're going to counsel with one another. And it became known then that this is where that they will always be coming together to counsel in the territory of Tadadaho. And so then at that time, they said that we will now take a break. In 3 days' time, we will come back together. But that understanding of 3 days' time meant 3 years' time. In 3 years, we will come back together. And in that time, you will bring all of your people back together as well. And we will then begin to formulate all of the things of how we're going to establish the things and how we're going to build our house. And our house is going to be from the east to the west, will extend. And so then, this is what they did. They all went back to their respective places, back to their villages at that time. Hayewade, he said that I'm going to look about all of this land. I'm going to travel. I'm going to take my time getting back. I want to look about this land around. And so he did. And so they say that as he was traveling back, there was one area, they say, in the territory of Tadadaho, the Onondagas, he came to this lake. And at this lake, they say, that almost every kind of waterfowl imaginable was on that lake. Swans, geese, ducks, loons, all kinds of these kind of birds that live in the water or near the water. And so he thought about it, that how is it that he's going to get across here? It's going to take him quite a time, they say, or he thought that it would take much longer time for him to go around if he had to. And this is what he was thinking. Just at that time, they say that all of the birds, they took flight. They all took off. And it seemed as though, or it was, that they also had taken up the water. And so then Hayewade, he was now going to go across this lake. Now, because now there was no water there. So they say that as he was going across, all of a sudden, he began to find these kinds of things, these shells that were at the lake. But there was also some that were made into beads already. And so when he saw that, he began to pick all of these things up. And he put them everywhere that he could, wherever he could fit them all, in pouches and things like that that he had. He says that this is going to be something that everyone is going to utilize when we all get back together in that time. And so it was. He had taken this. And it came to being, that's how we came to understand what this was going to be. As I began to tell you about this, so this is what they refer to as our minds and how it is. And this is what they utilized. Now, I brought a few things. These aren't the real wampums. But when they got together, the peacemaker, once he established all of the chiefs, he asked each of them if it would be possible for them, in order for them to all be in agreement to the things that they would do, that they would all forward a small span of wampum, white wampum, and they would tie it all together. Ne wahadinado kanchok wan hasta ne ka ika chinate wahadinado. Kwa hagwego chinate antwanutun yungo to I wade. Ne luno ha kalipayandah lutianis ahadi ha wade. Daga nahte awadawya. So the understanding was then that they would always link their arms together, and this will always be that strengthens the people. All of the things that pertain to who they are is inside of this circle. The ways they govern themselves, their ceremonies, their language, the clans, everything that pertains to who they are as a people, it is the chiefs, they say, that is entrusted with holding that together, holding it, everything together in this circle. And so it is that each of those chiefs, they made their pledge that they will always hold together the governance and also their ceremonial things, always intertwined with one another, always being together. They also begin to establish their territories. And when we begin to talk about the territories, it starts from the east and goes to the west. There's always a path. The Mohawks, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, Cayugas, and the Senecas. And there's always a path that is always open to the other nations who decide to agree to take hold of the great law of peace. And in that time, when they would make these things, this was the first way or how they made their looms back in the day. And they would make it in a bow shape, and they would tie their sinew, or at that time they were using a lot of the basswood bark, the inner bark, and they would roll it into making it like a twine type thing. And that's what they used. And then they would string it on these things, and then what this one represents is the rafters of the house, and there's 5 of them, in which this is then the building of each of the nations coming together, building their homes, or building their establishing their longhouses, and that's what that represents. This one here is referred to as the Tadadaho belt, and the Tadadaho, they say that this is where the tree of peace, of where they had established it to grow or to be at. And each of these diamond shapes are each of the chiefs of the Onondaga Nation. And each of these bars right here begins to establish the how they will sit in council. So there's the first 5, and then there's the next 4, and then you have another 5 here, and how they sit in their councils. And that's what these bars are that divides how they're going to sit in their councils. Now, the other thing too, the one over here, is what they refer to as the fire. Is the fire of the Confederacy. And before this purple one here, I'll explain that a little bit later, but each of the nations, they also had pledged a strand of white wampum. And responsibility, again, was with Tadadaho and his relatives, the Onondagas. And they would always formally open up the meetings whenever they came together in his territory. And they would give their thanksgiving for all of the things that is mentioned, that we talk about in giving our thanks to one another, and all of the things on earth, and all of the things that have been appointed, that we say, that like the winds and the thunders and sun, moon, and stars, those are appointed to always be continuously working with all of the things on earth. And so they would always formally open this. Now, it also talks about how they're to address one another when they're in council. Because now it talks about how when they make their fire, that there are 2 kinds of wood that they should not utilize when they make their fire. One of them being the thorn trees, and the other one is chestnut. And the peacemaker went on to explain, to say that these kinds of woods should not be utilized when you make your fire. Reason being is, if you make your fire of this kind of wood, as the fire is going, it begins to pop. Begins to pop all over the place, which might cause injury, which also causes homes to burn down if you utilize this kind of wood. But it also signifies that this is also would be how the chiefs would be. They would be popping here and there and not be in a good way. So when you make your fire, you make it with the wood that is going to burn clean and always be nice and warm and inviting to people. And so that, how they established that. They also mentioned to say that when you come together to meet, that you should always have someone watching. That you should never continue your counsels in the darkness. That when the sun is perhaps almost setting that the meeting should be closed before the sun sets. If it comes to where you will be meeting during that time that the sun has set, at that time they say that a lot of things begins to distort the minds. Darkness comes into minds of the people and causes ill will between one another. And so he says that this is not what the chiefs should do to one another. That they should always have that understanding of how their people are, to always continue to express that peace and that love and caring for one another as people, and have that respectfulness for each other as human beings. And all of that comes from that power of how you think. It's in our minds of how we have that established, that understanding. Now this one, this comes in way later. This comes in at a time when the arrival, we say, of the European peoples came to this part of the world. This they refer to as Digni Diohahade, the Turo. And the establishment of this was how we're going to coexist with one another. And it was first established in 1613 and continued from that time as they began to formulate all of the things. This was first with the Dutch people. And as time went on, then it also with the French. And as time went on with the British. And then as time went on with also the 13 colonies, I guess you would say, the Americans. Now, the understanding was that this would be the canoe of our people, and on this side is where the great vessel would be. And in between is that friendship and honor and respect of one another, to always have that. And so that we would never interfere in each other's affairs, and that we will always continuously go in what we say refer to as the river of life. And so as time went on, as I was saying, that you first established in 1613 with the Dutch, but it was continuous to say that they came back and said, well, what if? All the what ifs started coming in. So they said, well, what if your people desire to go into our ship? And they said, well, perhaps in time that may happen. And if they do so, that is fine, they can do that. But the understanding is that all of the things that pertain to who they are will continue to stay in the canoe. Their ways, their language, all of the things will always stay in their side, in their side of the canoe, because that is for the future generations to pick up. So that will be in there. And they agreed. And then he said, well, what if one of our people decide to want to come into your canoe? And again, they said, that may be possible, but we would like to forewarn that because of our canoe is swift, perhaps they may not be able to understand the things that our waves are complex. Would be too complex for them to understand. And so they agreed. And so then they said, what if one of yours from your canoe decides to want to have his foot in the canoe and also into the vessel? Or one of our people would decide to have his foot in the vessel or in one in the canoe. What if that would happen? And so again, they came back and they said, well, perhaps that may happen. But again, you must also be forewarned that perhaps as we're going alongside, side by side in this river of life, what would it be is if maybe a storm would come up, or maybe there may be something that may be in the middle of that water, of that river. It would cause both the canoe and the vessel to separate away from each other, and those people would surely fall in. That's what would happen. And we don't know what that fate may be for those people who fall into the water. That is not for us to decide or understand. Only the Creator would know. Only the Creator would decide what their fate would be. And so again, they agreed that that's how it would be. So in that time, that continued with the Dutch and with the French, and with the British. But with the British, there was another belt that was made. I'm still working on that one. But that belt is what they refer to as the covenant chain. That's how that came to be. And I went way past the time I was supposed to. I'm sorry. But anyway, I kind of got away with my telling here. Sometimes that happens. Anybody have any questions? Comments? Criticisms?
Don't go.
No.
Yeah, go.
But yeah. So, don't go for all of you too for attentively listening.